Hi everybody, Kirsten Lovett here. Just wanted to say hi to everyone at the Patreon and thank you so much for all your support. Um, Happy New Year, of course. It's January 2020. And I just wanted to talk to you guys today about something that kind of probably needs to be brought up periodically, every once in a while, because sometimes it's good to take a look at the big picture of things. So, I'm just going to go over some thoughts I've had about looking at engaging with ancestral spirits and just look at it from a big picture standpoint as far as time is concerned. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Okay, so the current modern culture we live in right now, 2020, right? Look at it, picture a timeline. And if you look at the timeline, we're at the end of a continuum in this particular sense. I don't want to mean like end of times or any of that stuff, so that's not what I'm saying. But just for this particular hypothetical argument. Now, if we're at the end, let's go back to the, maybe not the beginning, but, towards the beginning, at the very other end of the spectrum. Ancient cultures, what do we know about them? Well, we do know one thing. They seem to all have been giving in reciprocity to the earth in their animistic traditions. What do I mean by that? Well, we know that animism is the belief that everything has a soul, everything has a spirit, including, trees and land and water. And so we know that in the ancient cultures worldwide, no matter where it was, you can pretty much find enough research that says that these traditions, these people, had a animistic relationship with the spirits of the air, water, fire, earth. And so there's that. Okay. Then if we look at that as being the opposite end of the continuum, and then we move slowly over time and maybe a little more quickly over time, so that we get into the era of when the Christian church, I don't want to say Christianity, but what I mean by the Christian church and or empire, much more of a structural sense of what we're talking about here, the empire, the political aspect of the Christianity. Over time, that destroys the ancient practices. We all know this, but I'm just stating it outright for a timeline purposes. Then, if we take that continuum, follow it along to up to the present day, where we have modern culture as we know it now. Now, what I'm going to say, I'm going to go back again a little bit, back in time a little again, but I'm going to say right now, we start off with everyone kind of is aware of how disconnected we are in terms of, while we're connected technologically, we're disconnected animistically, and we're disconnected, not individual peoples. There's a lot of people trying to be reconnecting with the earth, but as a culture, as a whole, as a group, overall, we're disconnected. So that, and I want to bring up this one little side point that sometimes comes up in discussions and various groups about the New Age movement. So what I want to say is modern culture is so disconnected in some ways as a whole that any attempt to connect with ancient ways at the beginning of the spectrum is perceived by some members of surviving traditional cultures as desperate attempts. What do I mean by that? Well, let me explain. Okay, let me just tell you, while that might be true, as in the worst parts of the New Age movement, I'm not condoning all aspects of the New Age movement, but what I will say that's good about the New Age movement, there's plenty of things that are wrong with it, but what's good about it is that at least people in the New Age movement at their best, at their most, authentic and honest and sincere, are attempting in some way to connect with that lost animistic relationship they know that they had ancestrally. Maybe they don't know it consciously, but they know it subconsciously or superconsciously, or however you want to perceive that. so that they know that on some multidimensional awareness, some aspect of them, whatever you want to call it, some people call it higher self, some people call it whatever. Some part of them is saying, I need to remember what my ancestors knew. And I may not go about it the right way, but I'm trying. So I think this resembles, and it can be warped in a lot of different ways and end up in a lot of different areas that it shouldn't be, okay? But this resembles, in a distant way, an attempt to re-engage with ancient ancestors, the ones from that beginning of the spectrum here that we're trying to get back in touch with. Or maybe if it's not the ancestors themselves, then the ancestral practices. What did they do? What did they think? How did they, especially in relationship with the unseen world, they went outside, they were outside a lot. What were they doing in nature, besides what we know, hunting, gathering, later on farming, beyond that, what were they doing beyond that? Well, there was a lot of things, and so I think this is just a subconscious way that the New Age movement does it. Now, the New Age people, I don't want to talk about them too much more, but I just want to bring them up as an example of what they do right, okay? Now, obviously they do a lot of things wrong, because what happens is people within set traditions, for example, surviving indigenous traditions, okay, that they've always had some kind of tradition, and they maintain them throughout time. They're obviously taken care of in this sense. They're outside of this kind of mentality, because they've already got a structure, so to speak, to engage with their ancestors. But outside of those surviving, existing, traditional indigenous cultures, there are many, many people, and they come from different backgrounds and different, skin color and different types of people, but they're all still living in 2020 as we are now, and they look a lot of different ways. And I think that those people who are living in modern culture, and I include myself in that bit, they know that they're some of them do, and they know that they're out of touch with their ancestral traditions. They're trying to recover them in whatever way they know how, with safety and protection, because that's a big part of it, which requires, if you're going to be safe and protected while you're trying to renew these ancestral traditions in the best way you can, you have to be able to have someone, or even if it's a non-human guide or non-human teacher, that you trust. And it's hard to know, who that's going to be too. But these people are all searching for something as well. These are the people outside of the traditions. I think it's better to provide people who don't have practices, who don't have an existing, living indigenous tradition, with some kind of animistic mindset, animistic practices that help all of us that need the help to re-engage with how all of our ancestors used to live. So what I want to kind of make sure I don't misunderstand or create misunderstanding is, I'm not saying, let's all go back and live exactly the way our ancestors did. That's not what I'm talking about. And I think most people know that, but I just thought I'd put it out there anyway. I think all of you can, ascertain that what I'm getting at is, and I think all of us deep down kind of want this, maybe in different ways, but we all want some kind of relationship that's similar to our ancestors, in that either with our ancestors and in some cases both, or we want to kind of recreate how our ancestors lived animistically with their environment, with the water. Maybe our thing is water spirits. Maybe our thing is, caves. Maybe our things are stones. Maybe we're into plants. Maybe we're into gardening. Maybe we're into journeying. Maybe we're into, you get the picture. Maybe we work better with fire. Maybe we work better with, the wind. There's a lot of different ways that this can happen. And there's a lot of different cultures that do this. And there's a lot of different people that do this. And there's a lot of different kinds of ways to do this. So I think why I'm bringing this up is I feel like sometimes discussions and people get way too specific about certain key points, and I think they forget to look at the big picture. And since that's something I enjoy doing, and by the way, before I wrap this up, the reason this kind of came about, well, there's several reasons, but one of the ones I want to bring up is that right now I'm doing some reading and researching and gathering about various different, well, actually one particular instance, but I'm probably going to get into another instance as well, but a particular article that actually is on the free, it was an article Marissa gathered from a woman named Carol Cusack, and it's about the felling of the Irminsul and the Donars oak trees back in, I think, the late 700s in Europe, in Germany, and in Saxony, and I believe the other one was in, I think they were both in Saxony. So that article has gotten me thinking, because, we're talking about the year 790 or around late 700s to 800 AD. And so it's kind of gotten me thinking about, the timeline of events and what was going on at that time. And at that time, just to let you know a little bit about what's happening then, is you see the article talking a little bit about how there was some pre-Christian stuff going on while they were kind of trying to, of course there was this military campaigns that were brutal, and we're going to get into that. But it's interesting, of course it's, maybe wasn't interesting at the time if it was happening, it was pretty awful and traumatic, but it's interesting to look at the different layers of things happening at the same time in Europe. It wasn't all or nothing. It wasn't like everyone was one way and no one was any way. There was a lot of different varieties in different countries of what was going on in terms of whether they were pagan, whether they were Christian, to what extent they were pagan, to what extent they were Christian, to what extent they still practiced their ancestral practices. There was a lot of different levels of that, and I think that really got me thinking. And then of course I was discussing various things with Marissa, and so I put some of these thoughts down, and I'm going to wrap it up now, but I just wanted to let you know that's sort of why I wanted to post this video today. This next webinar about, right now we're calling it cultural trauma, it's really going to be more about animistic traditions historically, but also some things that happened, and just to kind of be aware of that. And I'll be giving more details on that later in terms of what it's going to look like. But it's probably going to be in a few more months. But I just wanted to let you know what was happening. And, if you have any thoughts, let me know. Thank you for all your support, and hope to see you soon.